So I don't know if you can tell from my surroundings, but I've always been a huge fan of Nintendo. I've owned every single Nintendo console. It's primarily what I've played on for most of my life since I was 8 years old when I got my Super Nintendo. I have played other consoles here and there. I briefly owned an Xbox so that I could play DVDs when I was at university. And I owned a second-hand PlayStation for a while so that I could play the Final Fantasy games. But by and large, it's been Nintendo the whole way. And there was this period of time around about 1994 until about 1996 where the other companies like Sega and of course Sony, they were releasing their next generation consoles with the 3D graphics and everything. And Nintendo were kind of late to the party. And in Europe, you have to remember, the N64 launched in, I think it was March 1997. So really late. And so there was this period of time where all of the other console makers were coming with these amazing console games with really great graphics. And fans of Nintendo, we were just kind of waiting for something. At the time, I would only ever get new games basically for my birthday and for Christmas. So I would get 2, maybe 3 new games a year if I was really lucky. And that would be my lot. So I get like Mario All-Stars and Mario Kart. And that would be 1 year. And then next year I might get SimCity, love that game. And Link to the Past, love that game. And that would be my lot for that year. But in between, there were magazines. Every single month, there was a magazine that was launched. It was Nintendo Magazine System. I had loads of them. I've got rid of most of them now. I do have a couple still floating around somewhere, but I used to buy them every single month. And my friends and I, there were like 3 of us at school that were big Nintendo fans. And I remember just every single time a new issue would come out, we would sit together in the playground, poring over the articles and just discussing the things that we found. Because a lot of the information in there was basically previews of the N64. Look at this amazing game that's coming out. Look how cool this is going to be. And it would just showcase all of the great things that were around their horizon. If you just waited a little bit longer, Nintendo fans. And every issue was a little bit more of a sneak peek, a little bit more of what you can expect inside. And so that was my life, for a long time. And I really enjoyed those times, where we would sit and just speculate and just talk about the things that we'd been playing and what we would do if we made a game from scratch and things like this. My friend said that he'd make one where the main character was a tube of toothpaste and attacked people with toothpaste. And he was trying to escape from a shop, and it was a side-scrolling platformer, because of course everything was side-scrolling platformers back then. And I thought it was a really cool idea. And then, the first boss would be a till, and the till was like throwing coins at him. We would design all sorts of things. I made one called Balloon Man, where the main character was literally a walking balloon animal thing. And of course he could get power-ups that would transform him into different sorts of balloon animal things. And maybe he could get helium inside himself so he could float, or he could get, enemies would pop him so he'd die very easily, and all sorts of things like this. And maybe he had a slow puncture so he would deflate over time, and so every now and again he had to get to a pumping station and re-pump him up. We would design all sorts of things together, and we had a great time doing it. And along the way, somehow I came up with a great idea. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we actually wrote our own magazine? All of this speculation that we're talking about, all these words that are coming out of our face, let's get them down on a page and record them, and then we could sell it. So I was 12 at the time, 11, 12 years old. And at the time, my means of writing things down was a Commodore C64. We had a Commodore 64 with a basic printer and basic word processor functionality. And I went away, and myself and my friend Andy, we produced the first issue of Nintek. It was a magazine, very, as you can see from the front cover, a very badly spelled and proofread magazine full of mistakes, my gosh. And also, not only is it full of mistakes, it is, because, as I said, it was made on very basic word processing capabilities. It's just flat text for the most part. There's very little in the way of actual formatting. You know, I'd put the title in a larger font to make it outlined, but the actual text itself is just very blocky. And then what I would do is I basically cut out some images from some screenshots and things from the magazines that I was taking, and I would paste those in. And then what we did is we went, and my father was a teacher at the time, and he had access to what's called a risograph, which is not a photocopier. Photocopier just takes a photo of what's there and copies it. A risograph, on the other hand, what it does is it actually makes a template out of the page and then uses that template to kind of stamp more copies. And it works out in terms of, it's basically the more you print, the cheaper it is per copy in that way. And so I must have made like 50 copies of this. I made a lot of them. And as you can see, we were selling them for £1. And had I sold even 1/3 of the ones that we produced, we would have broken even. I did not sell a third. We lost a lot of money on this. But you know what? It was a bit of fun. It cost something like £40 to print all of these altogether. So you can see, like, you know, it's very, very basic. Previews, and then just a big block of text. It was like this, handwritten numbers in the corner. But this was Nintek, and it was really cool. And I've got to say, some of the journalistic integrity was very minimal. A lot of this is literally just lifting what was in those magazines that we were buying and just reprinting them here. There's very little like original thoughts here, and the few ones that there are questionable at best. For example, we had a regular feature. We had a feature which we called the Sega Saga, and it was basically just us ripping on Sega for all of the things that they were doing. And like, because at the time, this was the period where they had the Mega Drive, and then they made the Sega CD, and then they made the 32 add-on thing as well. And I was just ripping into them about this. What are you doing? Stupid Sega. So yeah, it's fascinating looking back now on Nintek. I'm going to scan this and put it down in the description if you're interested in actually reading it. But it was a fascinating adventure. And then what happened was, on the back of this, obviously I went to my school. I tried selling it. And the teachers were really cool about it, actually, because, you know, obviously this is something that I'd worked really hard on, and teachers were like, okay, cool, you know, as long as you're not disrupting lessons, doing it in playtime, fine. Have a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit. Go for it. Love that. Great school I went to. And so I was just selling it. And obviously there was a lot of feedback coming back that it's very badly spelled. It's very bad. It's just very bad in general. And a couple of my friends, they said, hey, we want in on the action too. Can we join in? And so we came out with issue number 2, which was a substantial improvement on issue number 1. As you can see, new look. It's issue 2. The price was reduced to 65p. That was based on feedback. Again, had I sold all of the ones I made, we would have broken even. We did not. But yeah, as you can see, just much better laid out, because by this point I wasn't doing it on a Commodore 64 anymore. Now I had a Canon Starwriter, and I was making it on that. And so the benefit of doing the Canon Starwriter is that you could add in boxes, like tables, basically like this. And by creating a table, just a single cell, and leaving it blank, that meant you could actually create space in the copy into which you could put some pictures, which is great in theory, because as you can see, I deliberately would leave space throughout my reviews and things where I could put pictures, but I had no idea how big that space would be. That was the limitation, that the screen on the Canon Starwriter was tiny. So I knew that I'd created some space. I had no idea how it would actually look when printed. And so in some cases, I would make like huge boxes, and then I'd have like tiny little images hiding inside it. And other times I would completely underestimate how tiny a box was, and I'd have to like squeeze something in to the tiny space available. Like here, for example, what is that image supposed to show? I've clearly like had to like squeeze down something. I think you can just about see Donkey Kong in there. As you can see, pictures did not photocopy very well onto the risograph. No, they did not. So, but yeah, overall, it was substantially better. It was a much easier process to write as well, because I basically farmed out some of the writing duties to these new volunteers. They both took a couple. So this Yoshi's Island review, for example, this was written by a friend of mine, Paul. And then we have Wario Land here. This was written by a friend of mine, Chris. And overall, look, tips and tricks. That's pretty cool, And then we even had at the end, again, copying what the magazines at the time were doing. We had Lenny's Letters. We created a little mascot called Lenny the Lion, and we had people writing in. It was just us. And he would do sarcastic replies to the letters. Let's see. He says, "Dear Nintek, I think that your mag is cool and full of brill reviews and news, unlike the mag I used to get. What do you think? But the best part is the continuing Sega saga." I just love the journalistic integrity of this. And I have to read this to you. "You may have noticed on billboards and other such things, adverts advertising Sega and their Saturn. You may also have noticed what some of them say. Score some speed. This may seem very harmless and normal at first, but if you look at it closely, score some speed? It is a known fact that speed is a drug. Does Sega want people to waste their brains on drugs? Maybe they have a secret sponsor. This isn't an ill-guessed rumor. This is real stuff. Even the official Sega mag has admitted it." Just for fun, let's read the first Sega saga, because it's hilarious. "Sega, although mad, are not stupid. You see, they realized that everyone else was 1 or maybe 2 steps ahead of them. So they panicked and started releasing identical consoles until they were out of money. Then they looked at what should have been a flourishing business, but instead was a failure simply because they had not planned things through. For example, they splashed out on the 32X, which wasn't very popular at all, because people like Nintendo kept fine-tuning their consoles to squeeze every last bit of memory out of them." That is actually true. Fair point. "Now, when you have a loan, what do? Obvious. You pay it off. Not Sega. They just take out an even bigger loan and are all set to release the Sega Saturn V. No, it's not a printing mistake. The Saturn V is all geared up for a release around the same time that a Nintendo 64 hits the shops in Japan. It will be good for a laugh." Now you may be wondering, what happened after this? Well, my good friend, after this, I went to secondary school. Yeah, this was the end of year 7, because where I lived, for whatever reason, schools went up to year 7 in primary school and then started secondary school from year 8. Completely different to the rest of the country. I don't know why they did it that way. So we were in primary school until the age of 12, and then we started secondary school. So it was that summer. Great summer, by the way, one of the best summers of my life. But then we started secondary school. And we went to different secondary schools, so there was that. So yeah, that was the end of Nintek. Or was it? Because a few years later, in 1999, I had a better computer. I had an actual computer with Microsoft Word on it, and I started work on issue 3 of Nintek, which would have been full color, and as you can see is now Nintek. CH, not K. I thought it was better. I was argued down at the time. Everyone else said the K was better. No. CH is the way. And this one, as you can see, was going to be in full color. As you can see, much better production values all round. Yeah, it was going to be a lot better. As you can see, I never actually finished it or produced it. I just started working on it for fun, and then I was like, no, it's not going to work. By this point, I'd entered my teenage years and I'd started to become self-conscious. And the idea of going into a classroom and going, "Hi everybody, buy my magazine that I've just made," was not high on my priority list. And I was starting to think I would be laughed at for even attempting such a thing. So I was very self-conscious. So that did not happen. However, this was not the end of my magazine writing days. I did have one last row at the dice. When I was about 17 years old, I was into heavy metal music at the time, and I started work on what would have been a heavy metal magazine focused on the heavy metal scene in my local town, where I live. And again, as you can see, didn't get super far into this, mostly because there wasn't a very big metal community really in my local town. And again, I was self-conscious because I was 17, and the idea of going up to strangers and saying, "Can I interview you for my magazine?" filled me with terror. And so again, it never went very far. But there we go. That was my magazine writing career. I've always enjoyed magazines and that sort of journalistic integrity. Thing of a past now, really, isn't it? But again, all three of the issues of Nintek are going to be scanned and available down below, so you can check them out and have a good laugh at them. Bit of a relic of the past right there, but a really important memory from my childhood. So yeah, thanks for coming along on this ride with me. Nintek.